Welcome back to my studio. My name is Monica, and if you are new here, we are working on these little minis for spring, and I have a prompt list in the description box if you want to join along, or maybe just save it for another time that you need some inspiration. But before we get started, I wanted to show you this cool little like drawing desk thing. You can see that it's at an angle and it's adjustable. And it's also got this, which I love because I can put my iPad up there and it's off my desk. So I'm not taking up a bunch of room on my desk with my iPad. And the reason that I wanted to buy this is when you're drawing, and I have my little sketchbook here of my animals, which I need to get back to. But when you're drawing and you have your sketchbook laid flat, it changes the perspective. And typically, I have to bend down and pick up this piece of paper here. Typically, when you're sketching, you don't want the perspective to be changed because it'll have a tendency to be elongated and your proportions will be off. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get this, because it's elevated and it's at a better angle. So I'm going to try this out today while I'm painting another one of these minis, and we'll see how it goes. So today, I think what I'm going to do is the close-up of a bumblebee. And I thought it would be really fun to do kind of like a little bit of a trompe-l'oeil thing with this bumblebee. And trompe-l'oeil is just a French term for trick the eye. And I used to do a lot of trompe-l'oeil painting in my house, actually. I've done a few like bookshelves with plants on it. And the idea is to make it look three-dimensional, like it's real. And the way we're going to achieve that is by making sure we add a cast shadow to this bumblebee and some really nice highlights. But the first thing we need to do is get it all sketched out. So I am going to grab a pencil, my mechanical pencil, and I just need to decide how big I want this. And just get these overall shapes sketched in. Okay, so I've got the basic body shape sketched out here, and I will more than likely lighten up this sketch line a little bit. And I can put in these indications of the stripes. And then down here is where it's all white. And then I want to make sure that I get these wings in here and paying attention to the length. Okay, I think we're ready to paint, and I have these new brushes that I'll be using today, and two of these are Princeton Neptune, and one is a 4, one is a 2, and then I picked up this little shorty um, watercolor brush. It's made by Raphael. It's a precision, and it's a round brush, and it's a size 0, so we will see. I think this little brush is really cute. So yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and I think we're going to start with the yellow first because that's the lightest color that I'm seeing, and we can do a couple of different things here. We can do an entire wash of yellow and then drop in some darker areas while it's still wet and save the black for the very end because it is the darkest. And I have painted a bumblebee before in my sketchbook that was done all wet in wet, and I don't think that I'm going to do that approach today. I want this to be just a little bit more realistic looking and not super loose because we're going to be putting a shadow underneath him to get him to pop off the page a little bit. So I want this to be a little, like I said, a little bit more realistic looking and a little bit tighter. So I'm going to start off with my, I think this is my new gamboge. And it's really, really orange. So really warm. So I'm going to add a little bit of my lemon yellow, or this is a yellow Hansa. So I'm going to add this into the areas where I'm seeing the yellow. And if I don't have to be super precise with this because anything around it's going to be covered up with black. And that's sort of the same idea that we used for the butterflies that we painted earlier. And you can find that video in this playlist for the spring minis. So I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre to this while it's still wet. And then it creates a little bit of a shadow down here in that yellow. And those are the only yellow parts on his body. I'm going to lift out a little bit of this graphite in the wings. And I think I want to do a wash of yellow ochre on the wings. And while this is wet, we're going to drop that leg in underneath. And this is actually, it's a little more yellow than I think I would like. So I might grab a little bit of this smalt color that I have and mix that into my yellow ochre because I want it to be a little bit more on the brown side down here. And I need to give my paints a spray. Okay. So adding the complement to whatever color you're working with is a great way to desaturate it, to neutralize it. And I'm going to add this in down here. And while this is wet, I'm going to pick up some of this burnt umber. It's a sepia color, actually. And I'm going to drop in this leg. Over here. And then over here. And this is not, I didn't paint that area, so I'm going to have to take my brush and rinse it out and kind of go over this. I'm going to add a little bit of water. just give that a second. And then this leg kind of, it comes out like right here. And then it goes down. I'm going to give that just a little bit to soak in. And this is way fuzzier than I want, so I'm just going to run my brush kind of along the edges and pick that up. I'll try this again. Up here, I don't want it quite as fuzzy as it was a little bit too wet. Okay, I don't want to get too carried away with that because that's something that's underneath the wing and I just want an indication of it. And I'm going to pull out a little bit of this color here. And once we go over the top of this with a little bit of a darker color and we add in the veining and we pop in some highlights, it'll kind of come to life. And we can, since we're already into the sepia, we can add his little foot down here. After I get the edge of my wing back in. So okay. Give that a second to dry and we'll move on and just lay in a base layer on the legs up here. And these are going to be much darker than what I'm painting now. Now what I can do is I can wet this edge up here and slightly overlap it into the yellow so that it bleeds out a little, or the edge keeps a soft edge, because bumblebees are fuzzy and we want it to read like that. So then I can just drop this in like that and just let it soften out. And it's only going to go where I've put the water. So I don't have to worry about it running all over the place. And I can do the same thing in this area. I'm going to wet it and I'm going to avoid this little circle that I've made. And it's actually more like a T shape, but I can adjust that once I've got the paint laid in. I can push the paint around where I want it to go, but it does overlap this yellow quite a bit. So and I'm going to avoid the wings for right now. There are some highlights in there that I would like to keep. So I'll just paint around that with the water. and then pick up my dark color and start dropping that in. Now I'm going to get a really watery mix of this color, and I'm going to add it to this white band down here. And it is not completely white. So I do want to have a little bit of something down here. It's got to have a little bit of contrast. If I go back in with white ink and pull out some little white fuzzy bits here at the bottom, it's got to have something to contrast with. So you definitely need a color. And since this is still wet too, I'm going to add in a little bit more of this darker color up here. And I really want the little hairs to be added in here, because they are really fuzzy. And I'm gonna fuzz out this edge here because it's under the wing. I'm just adding another layer of dark to this edge here. And I can take my brush, rinse it out, and fuzz all of these edges out. I really want to darken up this area here because this is really dark. Okay, I want to work on the wings, and the first thing I'm going to do is start at the top of the wing where it comes out of the body, and I want to make sure that that is nice and dark. And there are some highlights in there, and I will try to skip around those as best I can. And this is not quite as dark as the rest of the body. It's more of a brown. So we'll see if we can't get this in here. It's not quite that dark, but that's okay. I think we're going to be doing a lot of the wing with some ink. But I want to get the edge. I kind of want to get the edge mapped out here. And some of this veining. And now that I'm looking at this, I've got I think the leg is a little bit too far in, and let's just go over this with a little bit of water, and I'm gonna blot some of this out. So while that's drying, I'm gonna go over to the other side and work on that a little bit. And I'm just trying to find the dark shapes. Well, this got a little bit too dark, but so the edge of the wing is actually quite dark. I'm going to give these a second to dry, and then I'll go back in with kind of a wet wash and drop in this leg again. But I'm going to use my time here while that's drying to add in the dark areas on these legs. And these are pretty straightforward. I mean, just look at the darkest shapes that you're finding and add those in. So I'm going to add a few little hairs here coming off the top. And I'm also going to do the same thing coming into the yellow. So I'm going to do that around all of these bands of black. So just pulled out a little bit of color there where the wings attach. And I'm going to grab a little bit of this gray. And I had mentioned earlier that I wanted to go over this highlight. And I just want to push it back a little bit because it's not that bright. And I want to fuzz the edges out because it's a hairy body, and so the edges are not, you know, super defined like they would be on something that was like slick. And this area here on the body, I don't think there is a lot of hair, and that reads a little bit slicker than this highlight here. And that's going to have to be put in with ink. Okay, now I do have the antenna to put in, and then we have the shadows after that. So I am going to make some little reference lines for my shadow, and I want to get rid of some of this graphite here. And we have a pretty strong shadow that goes around the base here. And I'm going to put a little shadow here under his legs, and definitely here. And there's a little bit of shadow down here. Okay. So I have some shadow violet, and I think I'm just going to use that. Okay, I am going to go ahead and add in a little bit of white ink so we can take advantage of these highlights and also some of the little white hairs coming off, because I got real sloppy with my shadow down here, which I think I need to fuzz out a little bit. I did go back in to this shadow area right here and add a little bit of a darker color. There. So I'll get some of this mixed up in my lid. And then we'll be pretty strategic with how we add these in. So, you know, I've got some areas here on the wing. And anything that I feel like is too bright, I can always go back in with some watercolor and add like a glaze over it and dull it down. I definitely want to add a little bit right there. And I want to add some here because we lost this. And I'm going to fuzz out the edge by rinsing off my brush and doing the same thing that I would do with watercolor. I just make sure that all that white is out. And I definitely want to fix this white area because I lost a little bit of the shape, and I'm going to fuzz out these edges here in the center. And I think I might add a little bit more black around the edges just to give this area a little bit more shape. But I'm going to wait for this white part to dry. And now I'm going to add some of these highlights to the wing, to the lighter areas. And you can make the white ink, you know, a little transparent by adding some water to it. And then we've got some really bright areas over here. And if there are any areas that you feel like you need to punch up with color, you can always go back in with a little bit of a colored pencil, which is something I might do in these yellow areas because I lost a little bit of the shape of the band. So I am using polychromos, and they're made by Faber-Castell. And these are just really excellent colored pencils. And they work great with watercolor. And I like them because they're not super waxy like some other colored pencils that I've used. And you see how quickly I can clean up and brighten up these areas, and I could even go in with something a little bit brighter at the bottom here. And then I'm going to grab my black. And I've got my colored pencils sorted, you know, like neutrals and then colors. So it's a little bit easier to find what I need. Okay, I feel pretty good about that, and I think the last thing that I want to add is a little bit of text. And I love adding lettering to these little illustrations, or any illustration really, which is one of the reasons I like my nature journal so much, because I can really play around with some text. And I'm going to give myself a little bit of a guideline in pencil, and if I can find my pencil, and then I'm just going to write Bumblebee underneath in really super simple lettering. And I'll do this in a black micron pen. Okay, so that's it for this little guy. I had a lot of fun painting him. This paper, I have to be careful. I have to remember that this is a little bit of a delicate paper. I hope you give this a try. Adding shadows underneath, especially insects, can be a lot of fun. I will see you next week, where we're going to do another little mini, and we're getting close to wrapping this up. So I do hope that you have a chance to do a couple of these at least, just to get into the spring season. I will see you next time. Take care and happy painting.